The AAC Report is brought to you by Blahut of Realty One Group. Whether you're looking to buy your very first home or looking to downsize or upgrade, call Blahut anytime at 407-748-0484. Welcome to the AAC Report, only on the Knightline Sports Network. I'm Jeff Allen. Thanks so much for being here. Coming up, we continue our travels around the AAC on men's basketball. We'll chat with Rich Phillips, the play-by-play voice of the SMU Mustangs, and Bubba Rosenbaum of the Sports Objective podcast about the East Carolina Pirates. But first, a couple of notes to wrap up the college football bowl season. Desmond Ridder rushed for 3 touchdowns as Cincinnati romped over Boston College 38-6 in the Birmingham Bowl. That win gives the Bearcats an 11-win season for the second consecutive year. Tulane won its second straight bowl game with a big second half as they crushed Southern Miss 30-13 in the Lockheed Martin Armed Forces Bowl in Fort Worth. Justin McMillan tossed 3 second-half touchdowns for the Green Wave to finish his campaign as their quarterback. And the American in the bowl season, they finished with a very nice 4-3 mark after a difficult start. Conference play got underway last week in men's basketball. It's been nothing predictable whatsoever. Memphis down to Lane, then they went out of conference. They battled Georgia in that SEC series, losing a tough 65-62 game. UCF and Temple played the last conference game of the decade, with the Owls taking a 62-58 win. Temple then traveled to Tulsa, and they got blown out by the Golden Hurricanes 70-44. And then UCF dropped their second conference game on Friday, losing to Houston 78-63. Wichita State won their conference opener over ECU, and then took an out-of-conference win in that SEC series over Ole Miss. SMU defeated USF by 18 on Wednesday, and then on Saturday, they got an out-of-conference win over Vanderbilt. And then the Bulls, they rebounded from their SMU defeat to pound UConn 75-60 on Saturday, and that was the second defeat of the week for the Huskies. They lost their conference opener to Cincinnati earlier in the week. The Bearcats were then upset by Tulane on Saturday. As the announcer used to say on the old sitcom soap, confused? You won't be after the next episode, or at least in this case, the next game's on the schedule. And it is our pleasure to welcome back to our program Rich Phillips. He is the play-by-play voice of the SMU Mustangs as we continue our look team by team around the American in men's basketball. Rich, thanks so much for being back on with us.
No problem. Glad to be on.
So before we get started talking about this season, SMU's coming off a couple of tough seasons with ninth place finishes in the conference, 6-12. But this year, they're off to a really good start. As far as this season is concerned, they have started off the season with an 11-2 mark, 1-0 in the conference. How does that build towards going into conference play? Do you think they're definitely on an upswing?
Definitely so. And, a big part of it has to do with the restrictions that they had for the last 3 years because of NCAA violation under Larry Brown. They had been playing with 3 scholarships short the last 3 seasons, and this year Tim Jankovic has a full complement of 13 scholarships, and so not only does he have depth to play with, they've had issues the last couple of years not even having enough guys to practice with 5-on-5 because of the shorthandedness with scholarships plus injuries. So that certainly has helped them this season, and I think we're seeing it too the way some of these games have shaken out lately.
And as we mentioned, off to an 11-2 start. They had a couple of losses to Georgetown and Georgia. That was a double overtime loss, and they've rebounded since those to win 3 in a row, including the conference opener over South Florida, and then a thrilling 92-81 win over Vanderbilt with a big come-from-behind victory there.
Yeah, that's something you don't see very often. They were down 15 with 6:28 to play Saturday night at Vanderbilt, and I believe the NCAA record book shows that they're only the 30th time ever that a team has been down double digits with 5 minutes to play and come back to win. It was an amazing 35-9 finish in regulation and overtime they had Saturday night to pull that one out on the road.
So let's talk about this squad. We got 3 players averaging over 15 points a game and a fourth at just over 13 points a game. Tell us a little bit about this lineup.
Well, a big key to the lineup has been Kendrick Davis. He's a transfer from TCU at point guard who actually missed the first 4 games of the season because the NCAA hadn't approved a waiver for him yet to go ahead and play right after transferring. And finally they did right before the UNLV game. And since he's come into the lineup, it's made him a lot different team because he's the one true point guard on the team. And he just has a way of making everybody better out on the floor. Plus he scores really well too. And he's only missed 1 free throw so far in his 9 games. And again, just has really changed the way everything is. And then another new addition is Tyson Jolly, who is a shooting guard who transferred from Trinity Valley Junior College. He'd actually played a year at Baylor, too, and he's come in and been a terrific scorer for him this season. And Isaiah Mike's been their number 3 guy in his second year in the program. Great three-point shooter, but he's also pretty good with his back to the basket and pretty tough on the defensive end. So those top 3 guys have been really big for him so far in the first third or so of the season.
And what is the thing that makes this team, besides having the full scholarships, besides having Davis running the show, what is the key thing that makes them successful right now?
I mean, certainly Kendrick Davis is a huge part of it, and just kind of what you mentioned there, that they've got 4 guys that are scoring in double digits and doing it on a consistent basis. The other one is Ferron Hunt, who's a sophomore, playing it forward for them and had a double-double again the other night in the win against Vanderbilt. They have a real team unity about them, and nobody is necessarily trying to be the leading scorer every night. They're fine with sharing the load out there. And then they've got another guy, Ethan Shagwell, who starts in the middle, who's kind of been off on his offensive game this year, but he's been better defensively than he's been his first 2 seasons and starting to come around a little bit on the offensive end of the floor the other night. But they've got a really nice balance in that starting 5.
And what would you say is a team weakness or a thing that they need to improve as the season goes on?
They're still trying to figure out the bench a little bit. The last couple games, Emmanuel Bandamel, who's a junior college transfer from Hill College, has scored in double figures, and he also was pretty big the other night in the Vanderbilt game on the defensive end of the floor. And then you have another player, Isaiah Jacey, who just was added to the mix a couple of weeks ago. He's a 6'10" postman who transferred last fall from Texas A&M, so he had to sit out the spring and the fall semester. So he's only played in, I believe it's been the last 4 games. So he's a little bit not settled in yet. You know, he's a year away from playing basketball. It's kind of hindered his development a little bit. So they're trying to figure out a few of those pieces off the bench still right now.
And by the time this podcast drops, SMU will be already playing UCF, or that game will have already been concluded. But as you've looked ahead to the UCF game, I guess you've probably had to do extra work like the rest of us because it's an entirely different team from a year ago.
I think they've got 3 guys back, maybe, that were contributors at least on last year's team. I can tell you this. At SMU, everybody is happy that Taco Fall is not there because the last couple of seasons with SMU's point guard was a guy named Jimmy Witt, who's now transferred to Arkansas, and he was unusual for a point guard because he really had no outside shot. And so the last 2 years, UCF used a very unique defense by having Taco Fall, their 7'6" center, defend the 6'1" Jimmy Witt, and just totally took him out of the game. And then he was also in the lane constantly to block everything else up. So we're glad to not see him here on Wednesday night. And, yeah, there are definitely a lot of new pieces on that UCF team this season. Yeah,
I was at that game in Orlando when Taco had one of his career best outings, as a matter of fact. As far as the rest of the American goes, who else do you like in this conference besides the typical favorites that have been talked about mostly in Memphis and Wichita State, Houston, among the others?
Definitely Wichita State, I think, is maybe at the head of the pack. I'm sitting here watching Houston playing right now against Temple, and, you know, the thing I think the first week of the season showed us is it's pretty wide open. I mean, I thought Temple was going to be pretty solid, and they go to Tulsa and get blown out last weekend, and UCF's lost their first 2 to start league play. Memphis loses the other day, although that was one of those SEC games. And even East Carolina, who SMU's playing at on Saturday, they gave Wichita State a run for their money last week in their conference opener. So it's really a pretty wide open league. I feel like Wichita State's kind of head of the pack, and Houston's probably right there with them, along with Memphis. And then a lot of teams going to be fighting, I think, for that 4th spot in the league. And what, in your estimation, will call this a successful season for SMU? They definitely have to get back to the postseason. They've got to, at the very least, make it to the NIT. They haven't gone the last couple of years. You know, the first season when Tim Jankovich took over, they were just coming off of a year where they were banned from the postseason, and he inherited Larry Brown's team. They won 30 and went to the NCAA tournament. It'd be great to get back there. I'm not sure they're quite to that level yet, but definitely would have a shot at it at this point if they keep rolling to conference the way they have the non-conference. But I really think a postseason appearance is definitely what we need to see at the end of this season.
And is Jankovich on any kind of a leash or anything like that if they don't qualify for postseason, or is he still in good standing?
Hard to say at this time. I think he's okay. And again, you know, I think they're in pretty decent shape the way they've started the season out to have a run towards the NIT. So I think he's still in pretty good shape. This is just his fourth year as the head coach of the program.
All right. Well, Rich, if you can let the folks know where they can follow you on social media and whatnot as you cover SMU sports, please let the folks know.
You can follow me at rphillipstms, because I also do auto racing at Texas Motor Speedway, but I got a lot of SMU stuff you'll see on my feed too.
All right, that's outstanding. Rich Phillips, play-by-play voice of the SMU Mustangs. Thanks so much again for taking the time.
Hey, anytime. Thanks a lot.
And up next, we look at the East Carolina Pirates, where the AAC Report continues in just a moment. Are you tired of the endless money pit of paying rent? Do you have a home you need to sell for top dollar? Talk to the Hometown Advantage award-winning real estate professional and fellow UCF Knight, Blake Blahut of Realty One Group. Blake has proven to produce results and a smooth process for his clients all across Central Florida. Whether you're looking to buy your very first home or looking to downsize or upgrade, talk to Blake Blahut. Visit him at his website, blakesorlandohomes.com, or contact him anytime at 407-748-0484. Again, blakesorlandohomes.com and 407-748-0484. Get the hometown advantage by working with Blake. And we continue our team-by-team reports throughout the American for men's basketball. And joining us now, a friend of the program from the Sports Objective podcast, Bubba Rosenbaum, and he's going to be here to talk about East Carolina. Bubba, how you doing?
I'm doing great, Jeff. I appreciate you having me back on the show.
As always, we do appreciate you being here, and let's talk about the Pirates under Joe Dooley. He's in his second go-around as East Carolina's head coach. He coached him in the late 90s. Then after many assistant coaches' jobs, he got the Florida Gulf Coast job, taking over for Andy Enfield when he went to USC. Had a couple NIT appearances, couple NCAA appearances down at FGC, and now back in his second season as East Carolina. They were 10-21 last year, 3-15 in conference. And so far this season, East Carolina is off to a 6-8 start. How would you assess where they are under Coach Joe Dooley at this point in time?
Well, coming into the program last year, Coach Dooley, and quite frankly, he knew that the talent was going to need to be upgraded in order to be able to compete in the American, and the results last year just confirmed what he and the staff already believed. So they had to make some, I guess the best way to put it is tough but easy decisions, if that makes sense. Because you get to know guys and you have to do what's in the best interest of the program, but at the same time, it had to be hard, no doubt about it, to encourage that many guys to find other homes, and just because they didn't see them, being able to contribute to the level necessary in order to be able to compete in a top flight basketball league like the American. So that took place, and you guys are obviously very familiar with USF, and the Bulls did something similar, not quite to this level, but Brian Gregory brought in something like at least 7 or 8 new pieces prior to last season. Joe Dooley brought in 11 new pieces, 4 freshmen, and then also 7 JUCO transfers. It's not quite as extreme as it seems in terms of the JUCO transfers, because at least 2 of those JUCO transfers are able to play 3 seasons, so a little bit nicer in that regard, instead of just having 2 years in the program. But as far as where things are now, thus far, you said 6-8, 0-1 in the league. Started off rough, to say the least. You had a lot more games on the road than you would have liked early on. Some of those games were already scheduled prior to the decision to execute that roster overhaul. 6 of the 8 games in the month of November were played away from NG's Coliseum, so that was very tough with all these new pieces. And so 3 of those were neutral site games down in the Bahamas against some quality competition, and then also those 3 road games. Just on paper, it doesn't look like much, but Navy's not a bad basketball team. They took Virginia down to the wire the other night, and then also App State has been a big surprise in the Sun Belt. I think that they're something like 9-6, and App State has been very good thus far. So, and those were games that we lost by 2 possessions. So, really taking a look at it as you went into the month of December, even prior to the struggles in November, you knew, looking at things on paper with that December schedule, 5 home games, that was going to be part of the schedule. You're really going to need to make some hay, and the Pirates were able to do that. And it was a rough start to the month, gave up 85 points in a 10-point loss to Coppin State. But after that, got some wins over some decent competition in Charlotte and Campbell. Charlotte was a club that had beaten Wake Forest and Davidson. And so definitely progressing. And then on New Year's Day, what a way to open league play, going out to Wichita State. But after a 9-0 shocker run to start the ball game, and the Pirates played pretty well and took 24th ranked Wichita State down to the wire before falling by 6. So looking at things going into the season, you knew Jaden Gardner was going to be a guy that you could rely on. He was an all-freshman selection a season ago in the AAC, and he has been the epitome of solid thus far. 21 points plus per ball game, more than 9 rebounds per game. And then the only other returner was Seth Leday, and Seth Leday, after 6 games, he missed 2 or 3 ball games, and then the decision was made that he was going to be exiting the program. And that from a production standpoint, really hurt, because Seth is a guy that he was 6'7", and could really jump, even though he had just had an ACL injury. And he had a 19 or 20-point ball game against App State early in the year, but for whatever reason, and that decision was made, and we've handled it better than I thought we might. So some of the other guys, in addition to Jaden Gardner, that you can really count on, freshman Brandon Suggs, he's a guy that's averaging close to 10 points and 4 rebounds per ball game, has scored in double figures in probably 10 or 11 of the Pirates' 14 games. And then another thing that really threw a hitch in things is those JUCO guards, Tyree Jackson and also Tremont Robinson-White, 2 guys the Pirates are really counting on. They were unavailable for the first several ball games, pretty much for all of the month of November. And so those guys are back now, and I really think early on, if we'd have had those guys, that we'd have probably won at least one, if not a couple of those games that we lost on the road in November, like App State and Navy. But it is what it is, and those guys are back and kind of working their way back into game shape now, especially Tremont Robinson-White. He's a guy that, coming out of junior college, was one of the most highly regarded junior college point guards in the country, and you can see flashes of what he can be, but he just has to play with a lot more consistency, because right now he and the other guards are, quite frankly, turning over way too much. In the last several ball games, the Pirates have been up there between 15 and 20, maybe even over 20 turnovers.
All right.
I know that was a lot, but that's kind of where things have been headed into league play.
Yeah, so let's talk a little bit about Jaden Gardner. And for those who haven't seen him play, and again, you mentioned he's putting up 21 points a game, over 9 rebounds a game, and certainly making an early statement to be Player of the Year in the AAC.
Yeah, he's certainly going to put himself in the discussion. Through 14 ball games, he scored in double figures in every single game, and he's had 7 double-doubles. So he had his career high against Wichita State, 29 points against the Shockers on New Year's Day, and he's just so steady. He's shooting close to 60% from the floor. He shoots free throws well. I guess if he has a weakness to his game, his biggest thing being that he's 6'6". Some places you may see him listed at 6'7", but he's really probably closer to 6'6". And Jaden Gardner, he has knocked down a couple threes over the last 2 ball games, but that would be his weakness, his ability to extend out beyond the arc. But he can consistently knock down that 15 to 18-foot jump shot, and he has done that with pretty good consistency. But as far as Jaden, Jaden's a guy with an extremely high motor. He just plays so hard, and at points in the game, you can tell other guys are hesitant to want to take shots or make certain passes and those sorts of things. Jaden's a guy that he lets the game come to him, and if he needs to, he'll put the team on his back and make things happen.
Yeah, that's interesting the way you say that, because if my math is right, I think he's been the leading scorer in 10 of their games and a leading rebounder in 10 of the games, so he seems to do whatever's needed to get the job done for the team.
He most definitely does, and you just watch him play. It's awesome to see the energy and the passion that he has for the game, and just that's what he'll make a play, a 3-point play, or even maybe if things didn't go his way, he'll have a smile on his face. He just brings so much positive energy to the floor. I can't imagine how much of an asset he is to Coach Dooley and this staff as far as the locker room and so forth. He has to be great in that regard.
So what, in your estimation, would qualify as a successful season for East Carolina as they continue this rebuild?
After the 2-6 start, or actually 2-7 start, losing that first game in the month of December, like I mentioned, the Coppin State, we obviously put ourselves behind the 8 ball in terms of trying to have a winning season. 10 wins, like you mentioned a year ago, 10-21 was the final mark. At this point, we're 6-8, and so I'd say if we can find a way to approach 500 in league play, that would be pretty solid. To a lot of folks, that may not sound like much, but with where our program's been and in a league of this caliber, if you can find a way to go 8-10 or 7-11 in this league, and that would definitely be a huge step in the right direction. Because I know a season ago, I guess we just won 3 league games, a couple over Tulane, and then also that upset over Cincinnati.
And I'm asking everybody who's on the program who else they like in the conference. And, of course, you guys have already gotten a good look at one of the top teams in the conference in Wichita State. Memphis obviously is in the conversation with their talent, even minus James Weissman. What do you think about the rest of the conference?
Like you said, obviously Memphis and Wichita State certainly jump off the page for sure. But you take a look, Kelvin Sampson down at Houston, they're very solid again. They just had a nice win over SEC opponent in South Carolina, won that pretty handily. You take a look at what Ron Hunter's doing at Tulane. That's something that's really stood out to me. He did a heck of a job at Georgia State, and Ron Hunter has the Green Wave playing very good basketball. They played Memphis very respectably in the conference opener on December 30th, and then they took down Cincinnati down there in New Orleans here just in the last few days.
Yeah, they definitely are definitely on the upswing, and UCF got to look at Houston, and boy, Nate Hitton is such a tremendous player in what he does for that team, and boy, it's like they just kind of reload. They have superstars, and as soon as they graduate or move on, the next wave is in.
Yeah, no doubt about it. And Jeff, I tell you what, as far as the Pirates are concerned, something else I would add. In order for this team to be able to approach that 500 mark, like I was saying, in league play, something that absolutely has to improve is the three-point shooting. A season ago, it was only right there around 28 or 29%. Obviously, the line was pushed back this year, so it's tough to compare, but it's still been very poor. It's 28.5% from three. The most makes on the team is only 17 from behind the arc, and we only have 3 guys that have hit 13 or more. And So last year you had a guy like Sean Williams who finished up the year probably 65 or 73s. This year we just simply haven't had that guy, and we don't have that guy that's going to step up and knock down 5, 6, 7 threes in a ball game, and that's something that this team really needs to develop, whether it's from J.J. Miles or freshman Tristan Newton, or it doesn't matter who it is. We just got to Tremont Robinson White, he's a guy that has shown some potential, and then Tyree Pig Jackson, one of the JUCO guards, former Virginia Tech player under one of our assistant coaches, Steve Rockefort. Tyree did have one game where he knocked down 4 threes, so he's shown a little bit of potential, but the perimeter shooting has to improve.
All right, well, Bubba, give folks the lowdown on where they can follow you and coverage of East Carolina basketball with the Sports Objective podcast.
Yeah, you can follow us on social media, on Twitter at TheSportsOBJ, on Instagram at The Sports Objective. You can like and follow our Facebook page. And then as far as listening to our show, we're pretty much available in most places you find podcasts, be it Google Play Music, SoundCloud, Audio Boom, Anchor. You name it, you can probably find us there, and we certainly would appreciate you tuning in, because in addition to East Carolina coverage, we talk about what's going on within the American and the big three sports, so to speak, and then also we'll talk about things on a national scale. We'll have national guests from ESPN or CBS Sports Network or whomever on to discuss things.
All right, Bubba Rosenbaum from the Sports Objective podcast, we thank you very much for breaking down East Carolina basketball for us.
Absolutely, Jeff. We appreciate you having us on, and look forward to joining the show again.
And one of the things that Bubba brought up that is going to be something interesting to watch this year is the three-point percentages with the extended three-point line this season. That definitely be kind of an interesting thing to keep documentation of. Honors for the men's basketball, the player of the week, Eric Stevenson of Wichita State, averaged 23 points, 7.5 rebounds, and 4 steals a game in a pair of wins for the Shockers last week. Had a career-high 29 points against Ole Miss on Saturday after recording 17 points, 9 rebounds, 5 steals, and 5 assists in that aforementioned conference opener against East Carolina. And the freshman of the week is Precious Achiuwa of Memphis, a double-double average with 17 points, 12.5 rebounds per game as the Tigers split their games last week. In women hoops, the honors go this way. The player of the week is Kristen Williams, the sophomore from UConn, averaged 20 points, 5.5 rebounds, 4 assists, and a steal, as UConn had a 2-0 start to conference play last week. And the freshman of the week is Alina Senecki of USF, tied her career high with 19 points in leading the Bulls to a 76-68 victory over Cincinnati to start conference play. Hit a total of 5 of 10 shooting, including 3 of 7 beyond the arc. And she has hit in double figures in 8 of her 10 games as a Bull. And speaking of USF, for the second straight year, they have been selected as the league favorite according to the AAC softball preseason coaches poll. The 2020 poll comprised of votes from each of the 8 softball head coaches. You know, the American last year sent 3 teams to the NCAA Division I softball championship. USF, Houston, and Tulsa each took part in last season's tournament. The breakdown went like this. USF got 48 points, 6 first-place votes. Wichita State got a first-place vote and 39 points. Tulsa was third, 34 points. UCF 4 with 32 points and 1 first-place vote. And Houston was 5th with 31 points. The top 5 there of the 8 teams. The 2020 softball season is set to begin Thursday, February 6th, conference play kicking off on Friday, March 20th. The 2020 American Athletic Conference Softball Championship will be May 7th through 9th at the UCF Softball Stadium in Orlando. And in women's soccer news, Nick Boquette, who led Albany to an American East regular season and tournament championship in his 3 seasons there, has been named the new women's head soccer coach at Temple. So congratulations to him on that. As always, invite you to follow me on Twitter at JeffAllen_88. Please follow me. I will follow you, and so forth, and have some good exchange out there as well. And as always, keep it checking that Knightline Sports Network feed to get the latest and greatest regarding UCF and the American. And that'll do it for this week's AAC Report, only on the Knightline Sports Network. I'm Jeff Allen. Thanks for listening.